Today we're going to look at some graphs of the form y equals a sine bx plus c, or y equals a cosine of bx plus c. That is a notion where you have a phase shift. You have looked at ones already probably of the form is a sine bx or a cosine bx. But like I said, when you have a quantity with a plus or a minus that involves a phase shift, that is shifting the graph over to the left or to the right. So let's look at the first example. So I have y equals 2 sine of 2x minus pi. Now, there's various ways you can do this, but before I get into that, of course, we know the number on the outside is working with the amplitude. That is, the amplitude is the absolute value of what's in front, so the amplitude is 2. Now, as far as how you can find the period and phase shift, what you can do is take what's in the parentheses and set it equal to 0, and also set it equal to 2 pi. That is, we know that a period of sine typically goes, as far as graphing y equals sine of x, typically goes from 0 to 2 pi. So we're going to take what's in the parentheses, set that equal to 0 and 2 pi, and then solve for x. Here I have 2x is pi, and so x is pi over 2. Here I have 2x equals pi plus 2 pi. I'm going to keep that separate for the time being. Then I have x equals divided through by 2, pi over 2 plus, well, 2 pi over 2 gives me pi. But then we know that that combines as 3 pi over 2. All right, so what do these different numbers mean? Well, the pi over 2 is your phase shift. If you have positive phase shift, it's shifted to the right. If you have a negative one, it's shifted to the left. Also, this tells me where we'll begin as far as graphing a period of this. Notice that the phase shift is repeated over here as far as when I split it up. What does this pi represent? That is the period. That is the period, which you can also get from what you might remember. You could take 2 pi and divide by the coefficient of the x. That is a 2 pi over b. Okay, so 2 pi over 2 gives you the pi. 3 pi over 2 is where we'll end up at. So in other words, if you start at pi, travel a distance, if you start at pi over 2, travel a distance of pi, you wind up at 3 pi over 2. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the graph. Like I said, I'm starting at pi over 2. I'm going to end up at 3 pi over 2. And of course, we know that the amplitude is 2, so you're going from -2 to 2 as far as the range. This is a sine. Okay, so sine function, we know is going to be 0 at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It has its peak here, 1/4 of the way through, and it's a minimum 3/4 of the way through. All right, so there's a period of that. You can continue on by graphing more than one period. You know, like I said, you could go ahead and find what's in between here by taking the average. Pi over 2 plus 3 pi over 2 is 4 pi over 2, or 2 pi. Divide by 2 is pi, and then figure out what's halfway between pi over 2 and pi. Well, that'd be 3 pi over 4, you know, and so forth on that. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Say y equals minus cosine of 1/2 x plus pi over 2. The amplitude is just 1, but notice what being the negative here is going to be reflected. Let's take 1/2 x plus pi over 2, set equals 0, and 1/2 x plus pi over 2, and set to 2 pi. So here I have 1/2 x equals minus pi over 2. So I need to multiply both sides through by 2, so I get x equals minus pi. Here I have 1/2 x equal minus pi over 2 plus 2 pi. Multiplying through by 2, I get x equals minus pi plus 4 pi. Add 2 together, I get x is 3 pi. All right, so remember that this is the phase shift. Also, that's where you'll begin. 4 pi is the period, which you can also get by taking 2 pi divided by 1/2. Because when you take 2 pi divided by 1/2, that'd be 2 pi times the reciprocal 2, that gives you 4 pi. And if you start at minus pi, go over 4 pi, you end up at 3 pi. All right, notice that this is a plus. The phase shift is a minus pi, so in other words, it's going over, it's shifting it over to the left. And see, the previous one, you had a minus sign. The phase shift was going over to the right. And that will be true in general. That is, if you have a minus, it's going to be shifted to the right. If you have a plus sign here, it'll be shifted to the left. All right, so let's see. Got minus pi, 0. Okay, I got pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. All right, now we think about what cosine is. Typically, cosine, you have this type of shape. In other words, you have the peak at the beginning, the end, the minimum in the middle. But notice is a minus, so there's that minus sign. So it's going to flip it. You're going to have the minimum at the beginning and the end and the peak in the middle. And then it's going to be 0, 1/4, and 3/4 away. That is 0 and a 2 pi. All right, so then there you have it. Let's take a look at a couple more. One half sine of 3/2 x minus pi. The amplitude, absolute value of a half. All right, so I got 3/2 x minus pi equals 0. 3/2 x minus pi equals 2 pi. So here I have 3/2 x equals pi. To get it down to x, we got to multiply both sides through by the reciprocal, 2/3. So I get x equals 2 pi over 3. Here I have 3/2 x equals pi plus 2 pi. Multiplying through by 2/3, I get x equals 2 pi over 3 plus 4 pi over 3. But that combines as being 6 pi over 3 or 2 pi. All right, this is a minus, so once again, so we have a phase shift that is to the right, positive. So this is our phase shift. I'll just put PS, and so that's going to be where we begin. And we have our period as being 4 pi over 3, which you can also get, as I said, by taking 2 pi divided by the coefficient of the x divided by 3/2, which would be 2 pi times the reciprocal 2/3, which gives you the 4 pi over 3 that way. So we're going to end up at 2 pi. Okay, so pi over 3. The end is 2 pi, or the 6 pi over 3. What's halfway in between would be 4 pi over 3. This would be 3 pi over 3, or pi. And this would be 5 pi over 3. This we're splitting it up into fours. Okay, we got 1/2, -1/2. Now this is a sine. Okay, so sine function we know is 0 at the beginning, middle, and end. It has its peak here at the fourth way through, that is at pi. And it has its minimum 3/4 of the way through, that is at 5 pi over 3. And there you have it. And one more. Y equals 4 cosine of 3x plus pi over 2. The amplitude is 4. Remember the absolute value of this were -4 to be 4. And then take 3x plus pi over 2, set equals 0. 3x plus pi over 2, set equal to 2 pi. I have 3x equals minus pi over 2. I got to divide by 3, or that is multiplied by 1/3. So I have x equals minus pi over 6. Here I have 3x equals minus pi over 2 plus 2 pi, multiplying by 1/3, or dividing through by 3. I get x equals minus pi over 6. Remember, this always repeats here, plus 2 pi over 3. Now, combining those, 2 pi over 3 would be 4 pi over 6. And so you get 3 pi over 6 here, which is going to be pi over 2. All right. -4 to 4. Got minus pi over 6. And so then this is going to be pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which would be pi over 3. 3 pi over 6, that's pi over 2. Okay, this is pi over 6, like I said. And so, okay, this is a cosine. This is not negative, so it's a typical shape where you have the peak at the beginning and the end, minimum in the middle being the positive pi over 6. 0 at 0 here, and also 3/4 way through. And so there's that.